So we're here with John Reid, who worked at Brassington's Mill since 1959. Hello, John.
Hello.
Hello. So if you just start by telling us how you got started at Brassington's Mill.
I've always been interested from school days in woodwork, and I happened to bring something home when one of the directors, Jack Brassington, was working at home, and he had a look at this object that I'd made. I think it was a folding card table, and suggested that I should think about this as a profession when I left school. So I asked him, would there be a possibility of a job there, and he said yes. So 2 years on, and I started working for Brassington's in 1959, April 1959.
Excellent. How old were you then?
15.
15. Gosh, and what were your kind of first impressions of the place?
It was quite familiar because I'd been going across for odd bits of wood that I had projects on at home, so I knew most of the joiners who worked in the joiner's shop, and I always had a chat with somebody in there, so it was like being another part of my activity out of school hours. You would call it a museum if it had been functioning today. Old-fashioned belt-driven machinery, all driven by the water wheel. There was about 8 machines in the joiner's shop, which was just above road level. There was another 2 machines in the basement, and they also had used a mortar pan, which they mixed their own mortar for building, which was crushed ash added with lime, and that created building mortar. There was also a log saw for cutting, after they cut trees down, for cutting planks for that, and all driven by water power, which from the water wheel. Didn't change much really. All machinery still was powered by the water wheel all the time that I worked there. It didn't need much maintenance, didn't the water wheel, apart from being greased round on a Monday morning, so nothing changed. It was quite dated really. There could be a problem during summer months when rainfall wasn't as active, and you could only probably use machines for 2 hours in the morning, turn the sluice gates off, and then reopen them again 1 o'clock after lunch, and then continue doing some more machining in the afternoon. I left in June 1966.
And when did the mill actually close itself?
It closed in November 1969. There were 2 directors when I started there, Fred, Jack's elder brother, and himself. Fred retired in 1960, and then Jack's son John, he came into the business in 1960-61, and they still continue with the business and part of the workforce. Probably about 20 workforce altogether all the time that I was there, masons and bricklayers, joiners, plumbers and plasterers.
What were the sort of conditions like? I mean, did they work you long hours or?
44-hour week. I started on 1 2 an hour. I'd been there about 3 weeks, and Jack asked me if he had a suit. I said, what would the suit be for? Because I've just been supplied with, my mother's bought me some big brace overalls. He said it's for a special job, so on mother saying yes, I was able to bring my suit, and I became a bearer, helping on the funeral side.
Oh, wow. You
got paid 15 shilling for being a bearer, but you lost 2 hours. But losing 1 2 and getting 15 shilling in return, I thought was a good way forward.
What are your kind of your fondest memories of working there?
I think meeting all different customers, different sorts of people. A chap that had served his time there was Donald Wilson, Yorkshire cricketer, and in his early days playing for Yorkshire, if he wasn't picked for the winter tour where they would go abroad, he came back to the mill to work on the tools. And on 2 or 3 jobs I worked alongside with Donald. We did an stage extension at Gidleswick School, and another occasion Donald and I, well me assisting him, made some pelmets for the Heart's Head in Gidleswick. Made these, and transport was a bit basic, we went up to the Hartshead with the handcart, so that was a step back in time for what we have in transport today.
Okay, so tell me a bit about the owners of the time.
They'd occupied the mill, their family, from about 1870, somewhere about there. They come from Edale in Derbyshire to work for Hector Christie and Lorenzo Christie, his father, who had the cotton mills, to do repairs. And the actual mill belonged to Christie's, so they had that as their base up to 1955 when the mill closed, and they bought the mill and they continued, and then eventually they sold it when they finished in 1969.
And what were they like to work for?
They were really good. Had much to do with Fred more with Jack, because he would go out and work on jobs. There'd actually been 5 sons in the business going back to early 1900s. First eldest son, he was killed in First World War. Donald and Tom, they worked in the office, and Jack and Fred both served the time as joiners, and they worked along with workmen, and then indirectly took over as directors after Mr. Rossington Senior died in 1948. But they were good to get on with, and if there was a job to do and Jack wanted another pair of hands, he seemed to lean to me, and I'd be his apprentice or his assistant, working at Gilswick Church or wherever it might be.
Okay, so John, what were kind of some of your favourite jobs that you had during your time there?
Slademan Church, when we were roofing there from September 1960 to April 1961, involved in all the woodwork side of it. A firm called Thornton's of Skipton, they were responsible for taking the slates off and re-slating, but the rest of the work were Rossingtons were main contractors. The vicar always had a half-crown coin on a plate in the back of the church. General public was allowed to go in the church while all construction was taking place, and the apprentice plumber was a bit concerned about this half-crown, thought it should be safe elsewhere. I think he had desires on this half-crown. One occasion when it was lunchtime, everybody came down off the roof, or we thought everybody had come down off the roof, but one of the joiners was still up there, and he spotted the apprentice plumber picking the coin up and shouted to him, "Oi!" And he dropped the coin, and he come into the cabin for his lunch to this apprentice, and we said to him, "What's up, Malcolm?" And he said, "I've just had somebody to tell me to put the coin down." And he said, "I think it was Jesus telling me to leave it alone." True stories, that. Yeah.
So you must have worked with some real characters over the year. Anybody who stands out really?
Jake Hurd, the gentleman on that other photograph, he'd worked at the gasworks till he was 70, and then he got fed up and he wanted a part-time job. He happened to be coming into the joiner's shop one dinner time, or just after lunch, and a coffin was being constructed, and David Richardson and myself encouraged him to be lifted into this coffin and to try it out. We hadn't realised that time was coming up to 1 o'clock, and the joiner's shop door slammed to, and the chap who was making the coffin appeared at the side of the box and said, "What the hell are you doing in here?" We lifted him out, and we had to go up and get a roasting for this activity, which did not happen again. That's another true story. So Jakey was quite a character, really. Apart from Parker Brothers, were only joiners up in Upper Settle. Rossingtons were the biggest employer, I would think, apart from cotton mills at that time. There was Manzers at Rathmell, and then smaller firms like at Long Preston, Wards at Long Preston, and Ralph Robinson at Ellifield. So they would employ most people, and a lot of chaps who served the time there would then go on to work for other firms and work further afield. It was quite a good place to work. good schooling. We went to Craven College on dairy lace for a couple of years, and then I think when I would be 17 or maybe in my late 16s, I went 3 nights a week after work. So you'd done a full day's work, you arrived home at 5:30, either drove down when we were able to drive, or catch 5:30 Pennine bus to go to Skipton for 3 nights a week, and I continued doing that up till I was 21.
So you now live straight opposite what was the old mill. What do you think of how it's changed in the kind of hydropower plant they've got there now?
After Brassington's finished in '69, it became an antique shop and repair shop. John Clough had that for a short time, and then Randall's of Skipton, they refurbished and altered it into 10 holiday flats originally, and then Peter Thornton bought it a few years on from that, and they have now permanent lets. So what was the dam isn't there anymore, all the sheds have all disappeared, and it's a new car park for the residents and anybody who's visiting. Tidied up quite a lot, because of the picture that you saw earlier on, sheds were in a bit of a sad state. In fact, they were next thing to tumbling down.
Yeah.
So our outlook from here is quite well. We can look straight across onto the football field, and nothing obstructing our view whatsoever. Probably as an apprentice, when I've been maybe about 19, I was instructed to go to Ingleton to Hillcrest Coaches. Dickie Lamb and his son Tony run this business to repair a wheel arch. I had to go with a wagon driver because they were having a new radiator fitted to the wagon, so I rode along and would find out what they were intended doing when I got to Ingleton. Mr. Lamb said, "This is a bus," and I looked at it and did a bit of measuring up and took a pattern of the wheel arch and said, "I'll have to go back to Settle now to get some timber." He said, "Here, you can borrow my car, give us a keys," and as I was climbing in, he said, "You'll have to be careful, the clutch is going." So that was quite an experience coming back to Settle. Cut all the timber out. But before I actually set off, he said, "What's cheapest sort of wood?" I said, "Oh, it'll be just ordinary dale." He said, "Well, we'll have it done in that. I don't want to be paying for hardwood because it were ash for the construction." So I followed his instruction and cut it all out of ordinary dale timber. Arrived back at Ingleton after another funny drive back there with a slipping clutch, and on with the construction, and got most of it complete, and a chap came down into the pit and was quite chatty, and he said, "Who are you?" I said, "I'm John." I said, "Who are you?" He said, "I'm Mr. New." So I continued the conversation, and he said, "What sort of wood's that?" And I said, "It's just ordinary dale. Dickie wants a cheap job doing. He's going to flog the bus when it gets past its MOT." And he said, "What should it have been?" I said, "It should have been ash." I said, "But I'm only following instructions." He said, "Do you know who I am?" I said, "No." He said, "I'm the Ministry of Transport Inspector."
Oh no.
So I really put my foot in it, but I told the truth. He said, "Have you got the other side to do?" I said, "I haven't been instructed to that." He patted me on the shoulder and said, "Don't forget it's ash."